this administration, specifically this president, isn't really bothered by the shooting that happened last week, isn't concerned about all the emotional things that all these folks are saying about that shooting from last week. What he's concerned about is what he can do to take away your rights because of that shooting from last week. Listen closely to how he answers this question.
That's a violent radical left group. Okay, go ahead.
I got peppered with a lot of comments for doing that. They still have their First Amendment right, though. They're still out there protesting. Well, you've got an amazing team behind you. You've done it all.
I'm gonna let you guys hear that again. He's talking about a radical leftist group because, he's a unifying president.
They still have their First Amendment right, though. They're still out there protesting. Well, you've got an amazing team behind you. You've done it all.
He said, I'm not so sure about them having their First Amendment rights. I'm not so sure about them having their First Amendment rights. Because, Donald Trump is a fascist. So again, if you don't like being called a fascist, don't say things like people don't have their First Amendment rights to literally protest peacefully and silently protest. Actually, there's another, right that people have. And a lot of times they're in the media and they get to ask questions. Donald Trump doesn't like those either. You know why? I think you guys know the answer. Because he's a fascist.
And what do you make Pam Bondi saying she's going to go after hate speech? Is that, a lot of your allies say hate speech is free speech.
She'll probably go after people like you because you treat me so unfairly. It's hate. You have a lot of hate in your heart. Maybe they'll come after ABC. Well, ABC paid me $16 million recently for a form of hate speech, right? Your company paid me $16 million for a form of hate speech. So maybe they'll have to go after you. Look, we want everything to be fair. It hasn't been fair. And the radical left has done tremendous damage to the country. But we're fixing it. We have right now the hottest country anywhere in the world. And remember, 1 year ago, our country was dead. And now Washington, D.C. is fixed, and I fixed it. The mayor was fine. The mayor was just fine, okay? The mayor had a sick city for many years. He's been mayor for many years. The one that fixed it was me and my people, and it is so safe. You should take your beautiful wife tonight and have dinner down there. You won't be shot. You won't be accosted. You won't even be looked at incorrectly by anybody. Washington, D.C. is safe. Now we're going to Memphis, where it's pretty rough.
And ramble and ramble and ramble and ramble. But he attacked John Carl there from ABC News. Well, maybe we should come after you next because you're so unfair to me by asking me a question. If you love this guy, maybe start explaining why that's an American thing to say. Why a president of the United States should say, I'm going to come after you next if you don't stop asking me questions that I'm uncomfortable with because it exposes how corrupt I am, because it exposes my fascism, because if too many people hear those truths, they just might stop supporting my ass because I need them to hear my lies. I've got this whole state-run media that's running my lies. If you keep up with that, I'm going to slap another lawsuit on you. In fact, now I'm going to threaten to, imprison you. What is he threatening to kill John Carl? What is it? What does coming after John Carl mean? There's no reason to support this guy, especially since his attorney general, Pam Bondi, in response to the violence that they've helped stoke in this country, this is where it really shows how much they wanted it and what they want to do with the results of it.
There's free speech and then there's hate speech. And there is no place, especially now, especially after what happened to Charlie, in our society.
Do you see more law enforcement going after these groups who are using hate speech and putting cuffs on people so we show them that some action is better than no action?
We will absolutely target you, go after you, if you are targeting anyone with hate speech, anything. And that's across the aisle.
It's weird how suddenly these conservatives are using this term hate speech. But it's actually very unsurprising that they're using the term hate speech to say anything that's against what I don't like. Hate speech, man, it's weird how hate speech was overwhelmingly coming from conservatives since forever. But at the same time, now hate speech is not free speech because let's call whatever we want hate speech. Hate speech, like what Donald Trump said there to John Carl. You hate me. You have hate in your soul because he asked him a question. That's what hate speech now is to Pam Bondi and Donald Trump's administration. I just want to tell you guys again, if maybe we listen to all those people with Trump derangement syndrome that said he's a fascist and he's going to start coming for people's rights, their freedom of speech, that he's going to start criminalizing opposition, like Nazis did. And when he's going to start jailing people for existing, like Nazis did. And when he starts qualifying and putting people in different categories, that'll be the enemies of the state, like he said he was going to do. I feel like we maybe should have listened to those, people with Trump derangement syndrome before, the Trump derangement syndrome turned into American policy. There was a couple people who normally agree with Donald Trump who saw that and were like, whoa, hold up. Let me read a few of them. Eric Erickson said, our attorney general is apparently a moron. There's free speech and then there is hate speech. No, ma'am, that is not the law. I wish someone had told Donald Trump that before when he was saying all that stuff. Here's more of these folks. There is no hate speech exception to the First Amendment. Nevertheless, the Attorney General says, quote, there's free speech and then there's hate speech, and the government will target you, go after you if you're targeting anyone with hate speech. The Attorney General would be wise to read the words of the Supreme Court, which has repeatedly held that the proudest boast of America's free speech tradition is freedom for the thought that we hate. Maybe it takes all these conservative folks that are telling her reality for them to finally get it. Here's Britt Hume. He said someone needs to explain to Ms. Bondi that so-called hate speech, repulsive though as it may be, is protected by the First Amendment. She should know this. Only thing Britt Hume didn't say was she should know this because they've been perpetuating hate speech for decades. And, every time they perpetuate that against certain groups of people, those groups of people have to continue to sit back and just go, well, they hate me, and it does lead to violence, and they have killed many people based off of their hate speech, but speech is protected by the First Amendment. Scott Greer says, this is moronic. We want the government to crack down on left-wing terrorism. Okay, we know who this guy is. We don't want the government to curb hate speech. This would allow future administrations to arrest people who share Charlie Kirk's opinions. Dumb, he says, but they still don't get it. So let's let Pam Bondi continue to tell them what it is that this administration believes in.
That's horrific. It's free speech, but you shouldn't be employed anywhere if you're going to say that. And employers, you have an obligation to get rid of people. You need to look at people who are saying horrible things, and they shouldn't be working with you. Businesses cannot discriminate. If you want to go in and print posters with Charlie's pictures on them for a vigil, you have to let them do that. We can prosecute you for that. I have Harmeet Dillon right now in our civil rights unit looking at that immediately, that Office Depot had done that. We're looking at that.
Businesses cannot discriminate. Someone should remind her that, this conservative movement made sure that businesses like, people who make cakes for weddings, they can discriminate. In fact, they were all over that story. But now she brings up Office Depot because some employee didn't want to print out some Charlie Kirk paraphernalia. So because of that, we're coming for them. You should fire anyone. They should deserve to have jobs. Isn't it weird how cancel culture has now turned into their full-on assault on the First Amendment? She actually posted a longer tweet about this to clarify her remarks. The worst part is this clarification is the same thing she was saying. Watch. She says hate speech that crosses the line into threats of violence is not protected by the First Amendment. She's trying to make some clarifications here. She says it's a crime. For far too long, we've watched the radical left normalize threats, call for assassinations, and cheer on political violence. That era is over. USC 875C, it's a federal crime to transmit any communication containing any threat to kidnap or any person or any threat to injure the person or another. Likewise, 18 USC 876 and USC 115 make it a felony to threaten public officials, members of Congress, or their families. So at this point, now she has to cite some laws and claim that that's what it is that she's going after, when she's just blatantly saying, if you don't agree with me, that's a criminal act. More, you cannot call for someone's murder. You cannot swat a member of Congress. You cannot dox a conservative family and think it'll be brushed off as, quote, free speech. These acts are punishable crimes, and every single threat will be met with the full force of the law. Do you notice that she said you can't dox a conservative family? Can you dox a liberal family? She didn't put that in there. Free speech protects ideas, debate, even dissent, but it does not and will never protect violence. It's clear that this violent rhetoric is designed to silence others from voicing conservative ideals. We will never be silenced, not for our families, not for our freedoms, and never for Charlie. His legacy will not be erased by fear or intimidation. It's almost like she's citing some kind of skewed law and legal logic that will criminalize anybody that doesn't agree with conservatives, conservative ideals. Conservative families shouldn't be doxxed. Conservative thought processes. Charlie, if you're not those, you don't have any rights in this country. Listen to the people who are espousing all of this fascism and believe them when they tell you that.